The day after Easter, the world was shocked to learn of the passing of Pope Francis at age 88. As Vatican City and the world mourns, preparations have already begun to choose his successor.
And this week, What's the Buzz? SU Weekly's Ross Willerth sits down with University Chaplain Fr Mallory to discuss Pope Francis' impact in the conclave to elect a new pope.
Thanks, guys. Joining us now is Chaplain Father Mallory. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Ross.
So, looking back, what kind of impact did Pope Francis have on the Catholic Church as pontiff?
Well, I think, when we think of what the Pope's role is, the Pope really is the face of the Catholic Church for the whole world and also for Catholics themselves. I'd say probably some of his biggest impacts were really his kind of very global understanding of the Church. Obviously, the word Catholic means universal. It's the universal Church. So I think his concern for trying to make sure that all parts of the Catholic Church are involved and have a voice and feel acknowledged was probably one of his biggest impacts. He had a chance to make a whole bunch of new cardinals, and one thing I personally really appreciate is that he picked cardinals from, locations of the world that haven't traditionally had them, like non-Catholic countries or Africa and Asia. So kind of trying to help those segments of the Church have more of a role, more of a voice, I think, amongst obviously his care and concern for the poor and for the immigrants around the world. So, there's like a whole laundry list of stuff he was impactful for, but I'd say definitely those.
So, being from Argentina, let's talk a little bit about the legacy Pope Francis left as the first pope from Latin America.
Well, I think definitely it has kind of helped, kind of like I said, with this idea of having the more universal church. Historically, a lot of the previous popes have been Italian. Obviously, Rome isn't in Italy, so that would make sense. But I think it just kind of encourages the church to see that there is leadership available from really all over the world. And again, as I said, Pope Francis himself, in choosing his cardinals during his reign, he picked cardinals from very diverse places that maybe had not previously had cardinals and had that kind of role within the church's leadership. So I think, to me, that's really his biggest impact, is trying to kind of expand the diversity of the leadership within the church.
Cool. How does the death of Pope Francis affect the dioceses across the world, including here in Davenport?
I think the biggest thing is just that, when it comes to the operations of the church, the operations of what we call the curia, it's kind of like the Senate or the Congress of the church, the different departments. Once the Pope dies, those operations mostly shut down temporarily. So Catholics might be familiar with the canonization process of Blessed Carlo Acutis. He's an up-and-coming saint.
Okay.
Fingers crossed. His canonization was supposed to happen a few days ago, but with the Pope passing away, that couldn't happen. So some of these kinds of things in the church are temporarily on hold until we have a new pontiff. On the local level, the diocese will still operate as normal under their bishops, but obviously we are in a period of mourning for Pope Francis. So if you go to the chapel here at St. Ambrose, you'll see we have a display up with a picture of Pope Francis, a space for students and faculty to leave condolences, their prayers for him, flowers, whatever they'd like to do. So for now, we're just kind of in that period of mourning and waiting. The church is still going on, everything is still happening normally, but just kind of in that period of mourning, waiting to see what's going to happen.
Well, that's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
So, for those who may not know, describe the process of conclave coming up in just a few days, and how the Vatican will go about naming a new pope.
Yes, so the conclave is basically a election that is held to select the new pope. So 180 cardinals will be brought together into the Sistine Chapel on May 7th. And then kind of from there, they will have a time to discuss with each other who they think would make a good pope. They can nominate candidates. And a candidate can be really any baptized Catholic male over the age of 18. So if you're out there, could be you. But usually it's somebody who is already himself a cardinal or a bishop. And they'll make these nominations, they'll have debates about worthiness, and then when they feel they're ready, they will have elections, they'll have votes. And in order to win, a candidate needs to have a 2/3 majority. And if there isn't a 2/3 majority, they just start from scratch and nominate again, vote again, and it just keeps going and going and going until finally someone gets 2/3 majority. That's a very condensed version of kind of how it works.
Okay.
But yeah. So I'm sure after May 7th, there'll be a lot of news stations, both inside and outside the church, trying to keep watch and see when the announcement will come that a new pope, has been selected.
Okay, that's really cool.
Should be. I'm very excited, interested to see what happens.
Yeah, me too. Well, thanks again for being here, Father Mallory. We'll be following the election process closely.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'll be following it too.
All right.